Tracing back through the great civilizations of history, one cannot ignore the cultural legacy of ancient Egypt. The vast golden deserts, the towering pyramids, and the mysterious tombs have become iconic images deeply embedded in the minds of many whenever Egypt is mentioned. Yet beyond the sands lies a wealth of fascinating secrets hidden within this ancient civilization. So let's journey with Mysteries Beyond the Veil as we uncover the ancient echoes of this remarkable civilization in the story below. The daily life of ancient Egyptians began along the banks of the Nile River. This mighty river, stretching across northeastern Africa, formed a vast triangular delta, an oasis of fertility in the heart of the desert. From this rich and isolated land, the ancient Egyptians cultivated grains and developed agriculture. The soil around the Nile, dark and full of life due to annual floods, became the foundation of their civilization. Unlike many cultures that came later, the Egyptians owed their survival and their greatness to the blessings of this sacred river. The ancient Egyptians held the color black in the highest regard, seeing it as the symbol of life itself. It represented the fertile soil along the Nile, the very foundation of their survival. In stark contrast, the surrounding lands, marked by endless red deserts, were feared and mysterious. These barren regions, plagued by violent sandstorms, were believed to harbor chaos and misfortune. As a result, the color red became associated with evil omens and disaster in the Egyptian worldview. Each year, beginning in June, the Nile would flood its banks, carrying rich silt that nourished the land. These sacred floods made farming possible, allowing the Egyptians to grow crops like barley, wheat, dates, lotus, and papyrus. The Nile Delta was not only fertile, it was alive. It teemed with diverse creatures that would come to shape the spiritual life of ancient Egypt. Falcons, cattle, crocodiles, leopards, and countless other animals roamed these lands. Over time, this deep connection with nature led the Egyptians to revere and even worship many animals, especially sacred creatures like the bull and the falcon, which became powerful symbols in their mythology and religion. As a land deeply dependent on agriculture, most ancient Egyptians were farmers. A smaller portion worked as artisans, while the lowest social tier was made up of slaves. At the top of this hierarchy stood the pharaoh, literally the great house, a living god who ruled the land. Alongside the pharaoh were priests and nobles, forming the elite class. Throughout the year, Egyptian peasants cultivated crops and raised livestock. They lived in humble homes made of mud bricks, wore light linen garments to withstand the desert heat, and dined on simple yet nourishing meals: bread, beer, vegetables, and fruit. The ancient Egyptians took burial rituals with utmost seriousness. Over time, mummification and funerary customs evolved into one of the most sophisticated practices of their civilization. Daily life, agriculture, and religious beliefs were meticulously recorded on the walls of temples and tombs, often in vivid paintings that held both religious and political significance. To the Egyptians, art was more than decoration. It was a multi-dimensional cultural expression, deeply interwoven with their way of life. For thousands of years, they developed a strict and unique artistic system that remained remarkably resistant to foreign influence and cultural assimilation. Unlike the detailed realism of Greek or Chinese art, Egyptian art prioritized simple forms, clean lines, and strict symmetry. Their writing, hieroglyphics, was often accompanied by symbolic illustrations, all carved or painted on tombs, temple walls, sarcophagi, and even statues. In their monumental architecture, stone was the favored material not only for its durability, but for its sacred power to preserve both memory and meaning. Despite their mastery of stone, the ancient Egyptians also made significant use of wood, particularly in crafting coffins. To bring their elaborate paintings to life, they employed materials such as iron ore, copper, and limestone as pigments. Alongside wall art, they also created small statues and wrote books of the dead, objects believed to offer protection and guidance in the afterlife. Over time, Egypt inevitably felt the influence of other civilizations. Following the Greek conquest, Egyptian culture began to absorb elements from the Minoan and Hellenistic worlds, especially during the Ptolemaic period. One particularly fascinating cultural shift occurred under Pharaoh Akhenaten. His reign gave rise to what is now known as Amarna art, a style that broke away from the rigid conventions of traditional Egyptian art. Unlike earlier depictions that idealized pharaohs and glorified their victories, Amarna art portrayed Akhenaten's actual appearance with all its physical peculiarities. This period also saw a shift in artistic focus. Scenes of daily life began appearing not just in tombs, but even on temple walls, suggesting a more personal and human-centered vision of the divine. Egyptian writing emerged as early as the 4th millennium BCE, making it one of the oldest writing systems in human history. According to mythology, it was the god Thoth, the deity of wisdom and knowledge, who gifted writing to the Egyptian people. Hieroglyphs were the earliest and most widely used form of script. However, contrary to popular belief, ancient Egyptians did not rely solely on hieroglyphs. They developed additional writing systems, including phonetic symbols and ideograms. Still, hieroglyphs remained highly valued, often used in ceremonial and sacred contexts alongside phonetic writing. After the fall of ancient Egypt under Roman rule, the knowledge of how to read these scripts was lost for centuries. It wasn't until 1799 that a major breakthrough occurred with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. British physician Thomas Young made early progress, but it was the French scholar Jean-François Champollion who, in 1822, finally cracked the full code of ancient Egyptian writing. This discovery marked a turning point in Egyptology, allowing researchers to truly delve into the civilization's secrets. Among the most significant texts are religious inscriptions, especially those carved into the corridors of pyramids, spells and rituals meant to ensure a prosperous life after death. While Egyptian art is often celebrated, it was perhaps their scientific achievements that truly set the Nile civilization apart. The ancient Egyptians were among the first to develop a calendar, and they possessed a remarkable understanding of mathematics, including an early awareness of the value of pi. Their knowledge extended far beyond numbers. Egyptian astronomy was sophisticated, and their medical practices were advanced for their time. Trade routes connected Egypt with distant lands, fostering the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies over centuries. One of the most awe-inspiring accomplishments was the construction of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. At the time, it was the tallest structure ever built and used cutting-edge engineering to guide ships safely through the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. Sadly, this magnificent beacon was eventually lost to history, destroyed by a series of devastating earthquakes. Yet its legacy continues to shine as a symbol of ancient ingenuity and human ambition. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were not merely rulers, they were divine protectors, the living embodiment of gods on earth, endowed with ultimate authority. Like many polytheistic belief systems that followed, Egyptian religion held that gods were not inherently benevolent. They had to be worshipped, appeased, and petitioned through rituals and prayers. The realms of the gods were hidden from the mortal world, and only priests were granted access to communicate with the divine inside the sacred temples. Egyptian religion was one of the oldest and richest in the ancient world, formed by layers of local deities and myths, many of which intertwined and overlapped. Among these complex spiritual traditions, 3 major pantheons emerged as the most influential: the solar pantheon, led by Ra, the falcon god Horus pantheon, and the Osiris pantheon, centered around death, resurrection, and the afterlife. Each of these systems told stories of cosmic battles, divine justice, and the eternal cycle of life and death. To the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not merely a source of light, it was the sacred fire, the origin of all life. In the solar pantheon, the sun god Ra held the highest place of honor, revered not only as a supreme deity, but as the forefather of the divine bloodline itself. Osiris, by contrast, ruled the underworld. Though Egyptian mythology never clearly explains his origin, he came to embody death, resurrection, and eternal life. Over time, the Osiris pantheon intertwined with those of Ra and Horus, giving rise to both cooperation and conflict among priesthoods. This spiritual tension, especially between the priests of Ra and Osiris, became a defining religious power struggle that lasted for centuries. While Ra was originally a foreign deity from Western Asia, native Egyptians gravitated toward Osiris. As time passed, Osiris began to eclipse Ra in cultural prominence. Horus, one of the most complex figures in Egyptian mythology, was first a sky deity symbolizing kingship. One of his eyes represented the sun, the other the moon. In early myths, the elder Horus was the son of the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. He married the hippopotamus goddess Rat Toy and fathered the younger Horus, also known as Harcesis, who personified the morning sun. As myths evolved, Horus merged with other deities. He became both the falcon-headed god of war and royalty, and also the divine son of Osiris. In some tales, he even fused with Ra to form Ra Horakhti, Ra, who is Horus of the horizons, the blazing sun in its prime. In the most famous myth, Horus the Younger avenged his father Osiris after the latter was betrayed and slain by his brother Set. A lesser-known version tells of Ra himself giving birth to twin gods, Osiris and Horus, only for Osiris to be killed by Set and avenged by Horus. This cyclical theme of death and rebirth was a cornerstone of Egyptian belief, leading many scholars to suggest that the younger Horus was in fact the reincarnation of the elder Horus. Beyond Ra, Osiris, and Horus, other gods played vital roles, none more infamous than Set. Often portrayed as a symbol of evil, storms, and desert chaos, Set was the usurper who killed Osiris and battled Horus for control. Yet in earlier traditions, Set was not evil. He was a guardian of the dead, a protector of Ra who stood against the serpent of chaos each night during the solar journey through the underworld. Set's image darkened over time, especially after the Hyksos invasion, when Set's worshippers contributed to his association with foreign rule and disorder. Uniquely, while most Egyptian gods had animal heads representing real creatures, Set's head was that of a mysterious, unknown beast, perhaps a mythical fusion of several animals, symbolic of his chaotic and ever-shifting nature. Isis, the goddess of magic, healing, and divine motherhood, plays a central role in Egyptian mythology. In the tale where Horus avenges his father Osiris by confronting Set, it is Isis who ensures Horus rightfully ascends the throne. Her cunning and magical prowess are also highlighted in one of the most famous myths, the story of how she discovered the secret name of Ra. By crafting a venomous serpent and placing it in Ra's path, Isis forced the sun god to reveal his true name in order to be healed, a name that granted her great power. As a result, Ra was compelled to relinquish his throne to Osiris. From this moment on, Isis earned another title, She Who Knows All Names. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the afterlife, is known as the Guide of Souls. He leads the dead through the realms beyond. Though often considered the son of Set, some myths suggest that Osiris fathered Anubis with Nephthys, the wife of Set, a divine scandal. Even older versions imply that Anubis was a direct son of Ra. Regardless of his origins, Anubis was deeply revered as the guardian of mummification and the keeper of the scales during the weighing of the heart. Thoth, also known as Tehuti, emerged alongside Ra and embodied divine intellect. As the god of wisdom, writing, and the moon, Thoth played a crucial role in maintaining cosmic balance. His most sacred duty was as the divine scribe, recording the judgment of souls in the afterlife. Over time, he was credited as the originator of astronomy, mathematics, language, and the very act of reading and writing itself. Together, Isis, Anubis, and Thoth form a trinity of wisdom, protection, and transition, guiding the living and the dead through the mysteries of the ancient Egyptian cosmos. The pyramids and religious architecture of Egypt. When people think of Egypt, the pyramids are usually the first thing that comes to mind, and rightfully so. These iconic structures are not only architectural masterpieces, but also a proud symbol of ancient Egyptian civilization. Interestingly, the Egyptians didn't originally intend to build pyramids in their familiar triangular shape. It wasn't until Egypt had consolidated its central government that the first true pyramid was constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, the founding ruler of the Third Dynasty. Djoser's pyramid was actually a step pyramid made up of 7 distinct levels. Later pharaohs of the same dynasty continued building pyramids and elaborate tombs. But it was under Pharaoh Sneferu, the first king of the 4th dynasty, that pyramid construction reached a whole new level. Unlike the step design, Sneferu envisioned a smooth-sided pyramid. After several failed attempts, he finally succeeded in building the Red Pyramid at Dashur. Sneferu's successors, including his son Khufu, took this vision even further, constructing massive smooth-sided pyramids covered in polished white limestone with gold-plated caps. This led to the creation of the world-famous pyramid complex at Giza. What's truly fascinating is the level of technical precision these ancient builders achieved. Despite having no knowledge of modern adhesives or concrete, they managed to stack massive stone blocks so tightly that not even a sheet of paper could fit between them. One of the reasons the pyramids have stood the test of time may lie in their unique geometry. Unlike rectangular structures, many scholars believe the pyramid's angle, close to 52 degrees, is what makes them so resilient. This angle, sometimes called the angle of repose or the natural angle, is the same angle dust forms when blown by wind, suggesting a deep understanding of natural balance. The narrow slope also made it easier to stack stones in horizontal rows. But perhaps most impressive of all was the incredible organization behind these projects. Ancient Egypt had a powerful centralized system that could mobilize thousands of workers, train stonemasons, and coordinate skilled architects and intellectuals. Unfortunately, few ancient documents survive to tell us exactly how these pyramids were built. The first pyramid, attributed to the Third Dynasty, was overseen by the legendary architect and high official Imhotep. Over time, more and more pyramids were erected, with one of the most awe-inspiring being the Great Pyramid of King Khufu. It took over 30 years to complete and once stood at 146 meters tall, though erosion has reduced it to 138 meters today. The Egyptians believed that life continued after death and that the soul still had to work in the afterlife. That belief helped fuel the massive effort behind pyramid construction, making it one of the greatest architectural achievements in human history. The ancient Egyptian view of the soul and mummification rituals. Unlike Western civilizations, which often believed the human being consisted of only two parts, mind and body or soul and body, the ancient Egyptians imagined a far more complex system. To them, a person was made up of multiple soul elements and one physical body. The body itself was seen as the dwelling place for the soul. That's why, after death, preserving the body from decay was considered absolutely essential. The Egyptian concept of the soul included several components: the Ka, life force; Ba, personality; Ak, the transformed spirit, the shadow, and the name. The body, or Ket, needed to remain intact so the soul could recognize and return to it in the afterlife. Interestingly, while modern people associate thought and emotion with the brain, the ancient Egyptians believed those came from the heart. To them, the heart was the seat of the soul. After death, the heart would be weighed against a feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the person was deemed worthy of entering the afterlife, a realm known as Duat. If the heart was heavy with sin, it would be devoured by the fearsome goddess Ammit, ending the person's chance at eternal life. This belief in spiritual judgment and continued existence after death led the Egyptians to develop one of the most sophisticated embalming techniques in human history: mummification. The process began by dehydrating the body with natron, a type of salt, and other drying agents over several weeks. Then, embalmers removed the internal organs, including the brain, which was usually discarded. The remaining organs were placed in 4 canopic jars, each protected by a specific deity. After cleansing the body with fragrant oils, embalmers stuffed it with herbs and spices for preservation, then sewed it shut. The body was carefully wrapped in linen and placed in a coffin, often with a gold or copper death mask. The coffin lid was usually decorated with the image of the deceased, allowing the soul to recognize its body. Burial practices varied greatly depending on a person's social class. Commoners were typically mummified in a simple way and buried in modest tombs, or even at the edge of larger tombs. Wealthier individuals were buried with more care and artistry, though they might not always receive a stone sarcophagus. At the highest levels of society, pharaohs, royalty, and priests, the dead were honored with multi-layered coffins, stone sarcophagi, and lavishly decorated tombs filled with treasures, inscriptions, and offerings. One of the most important rituals was the opening of the mouth ceremony. In this sacred rite, a priest would touch the mouth of the mummy, or its coffin, with ceremonial tools such as a ritual blade or hook, mimicking the act of opening the mouth. The Egyptians believed this act enabled the deceased to breathe and speak in the afterlife. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end, but the beginning of another journey. Their beliefs, rituals, and architecture all reflect a deep conviction that the soul lives on, and that the body must be ready when it does. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you found it interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next mysteries waiting beyond the veil. See you in the next mysterious journey.